As we manage our lives in this new year in another restrictive lockdown, I really feel those words from the call to celebration. We gather in fear for the future and hope for what's possible. There are times when I feel like we will never be free of this pandemic, never get to go out without a mask or worry about the number of people in any given space. Or will not be free to worry about getting ill or spreading illness. And it's that fear, small but persistent, that makes it hard to pay attention for me to our second principle, which asks us to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. How do we keep being justice seekers in the midst of a pandemic when we're also tired and afraid and overwhelmed? As people of the chalice, this is part of our religious tradition that we're asked to work for justice, to try and improve conditions for all people. And I believe that we're called to this work of a restorative kind of justice, the kind that pagan activist Starhawk describes. When a system is whole and healthy, when it's based on relationships of interdependence and cooperation that further resilience, diversity, abundance, sustainability, creativity, and freedom, it exhibits what humans call justice. And I love this definition of justice because it isn't about crime and punishment or right or wrong or good or evil, all those binary ways of thinking that these days seem unhelpful to me. Instead, justice is creating a healthy system in which everyone can thrive, free from oppression. Justice is love lived in public, as Cornel West said. And I think this is a very Unitarian Universalist view, seeing the building of relationships of interdependence and cooperation as a path to justice, as part of justice work. And I found Starhawk's vision echoed in the words of feminist author Robin Morgan, who says justice looks like bread, a clean sky, active peace, a woman's voice singing somewhere, the army abandoned, the harvest abundant, the wound healed, the child wanted, the prisoner freed, the body's integrity honored, the lover returned, labor equal, fair, and valued, delight in the challenge for consensus to solve problems, no hands raised, but in gesture, but in greeting. Secure interiors of heart, home, and land, so firm as to make secure borders irrelevant. And everywhere, laughter, care, dancing, and contentment. Now, Robin Morgan wrote these words for the United Nations Assembly that happened in 1995 in Beijing. They were a plea to the nations of the world to consider the long game of justice. Think about what justice really looks like. And this is good work, to create places of valued labor, a sense of security, of heart, home, and land, and everywhere laughter and dancing. And it's still necessary and needful work. The richest CEOs have already made more money in the past 8 days than billions of people will earn all year. People around the world are languishing in refugee camps, unable to move forward with their lives, lacking security. Unequal access to vaccines. There's so much to do if we want that vision of a just society filled with laughter and dancing and contentment. And this work is challenging during a pandemic. It's not just that practical sense that gathering to organize or protest is simply not possible, but because all of this, the shutdown, the virus, the climate crisis, the breaking down of democracy, poverty and inequity, loneliness and insecurity, the sexism, racism, homophobia, ableism, all of this, which we can hear about nonstop via the media, is just too much sometimes for our vulnerable human selves to manage. It's too much for any one person to care about and understand. So in this feeling of all too muchness, I was grateful this week to read about Dorothy Day. She's the radical woman who started the Catholic worker movement in the Great Depression of the 30s, opening hospitality houses for people in poverty. And Dorothy Day worked tirelessly throughout her life to help others, so selflessly that she's actually currently being considered for sainthood by the Catholic Church, which is an interesting outcome for a radical socialist who had a child out of marriage. But I read this week that like every human being who hungers and thirsts for justice and peace, Dorothy Day had periods of complete exhaustion, sorrow, and pain. She would then withdraw and cry for hours and days. She would just sit there, talk to no one, eat nothing, and just cry. She did not change her struggle-filled active life for the poorest of the poor. She never ceased to look upon war and preparation for war as a crime against the poor. But at certain times she wept, long and bitterly. And I have to say, I feel kind of relieved that Dorothy Day, now being considered for sainthood, who worked her whole long life for justice, at times of weeping. It's a good reminder that even the best of us have breaking points. Even the best of us need time to experience and sit with the grief of living in this unjust world. There's power there in being able to withdraw and cry, to feel the real pain of living, and then come back to the work of justice. One of the things I've always appreciated about the second principle of Unitarian Universalism is that it brings justice, equity, and compassion together. It's not a principle calling for harsh judgment. It asks us to hold justice and compassion at the same time, to find ways to heal when harm has been done, to find ways to build together across difference, recognizing our interdependence. And I love this weaving, for I know when I lose my sense of compassion, my sense of judgment grows harsh. Justice then often becomes awfully close to vengeance. And I feel this reminder right now. I need it because part of me feels like Dorothy Day. I'm ready to withdraw and weep bitter tears. I'm experiencing a little of what is known as compassion fatigue. Now, compassion fatigue can arise in those caring professions, nurses, social workers, therapists, paramedics, lawyers, anyone who takes care of other people. And compassion fatigue is about being emotionally, spiritually, physically overwhelmed to the point of sort of numbness, not feeling like what you do makes a difference, a reduced sense of empathy. It can create a desire to avoid helping others, increased irritability, and mental exhaustion. And while I am nowhere near a clinical diagnosis of compassion fatigue, I am struggling a little bit. I feel like this fall I had finally found myself back on track on that well-maintained asphalt trail I know so well. Clear skies, easy going. And then the blizzard of Omicron surged, restrictions returned, I lost the trail, and now I'm walking through a foot of snow on rocky ground. It's an effort to move my feet through the snow, watch out for icy patches and uneven ground. I can't go at my normal pace, and it takes so much more energy to move, to watch every step so I don't stumble. I think the pandemic blizzard of this winter has pushed many of us onto this uneven pathway covered in snow. It's tiring to trudge through deep snow, especially more so because I had that taste of the easy stroll along the trail. And knowing that this feeling of snow trudging is compassion fatigue and entirely normal helps. And I know that there are snow shovels to help me clear the path. Experts say self-care is the key to restoring your sense of compassion. You take good care of your physical health with good food, exercise, and rest. Set limits on your news intake so that you're not doom scrolling endlessly and reading all of the troubles in the world. Find small positive things to do, things that give you a sense of accomplishment, if it's cleaning a closet or going for a walk with a good friend. And it's taking time to feel the feelings, even the sad ones. And each of us will have to figure out our own way, actions that are restorative for us that shovel some of that snow away. And so I encourage those of you who resonate with that concept of compassion fatigue to take the time to acknowledge where you're at and find your snow shovels. Find ways to care for yourself and restore your empathy. It takes a bit of effort, but the path can clear. After Dorothy Day sat and wept, she continued to build the Catholic worker movement, to speak out for peace, to fight for people in poverty. Really think much of what she did in her life, she embodied our UU desire for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. So while we may have our days of bitter weeping, days of trudging through deep snow, I know we can find our way back to compassion, to work for that vision of justice that is so enticing and powerful. And one of the ways we can manage ourselves is to remember to celebrate our successes, to remember all the good that has already happened in the world. And there is much to be thankful for in this past year. Within Unitarian Universalism, we passed the 8th principle. UUCM was the first. Here, we continue to support pathway housing and feed hungry children through the Breakfast Club. Our mitten tree collection was generous and will keep many hands warm in the cold. We have volunteers at the Compass helping those in need down in Port Credit, and we fundraise for the food bank serving all of Peel region. We have volunteers at the Mississauga Climate Action, keeping our city and region to their promises for carbon reduction. We're building our relationships with local Indigenous people, and we helped another family arrive safely in Canada. These are all ways we live out the second principle and all things we've done during the pandemic. And around the world, there are many good news stories. The quick development of COVID vaccines means this surge is causing fewer deaths. Renewable energy is on an upswing. Last year in Europe, renewable energy generated more electricity than fossil fuels. LGBTQ+ rights are improving almost everywhere in the world. Some caveats, but overall, there's been new legislation and new protections all over. And we now, for the very first time, have an Indigenous woman, Mary Simon, as our Governor General. There is always good in the world that can be celebrated. Amplify it when you find it. Share any good news with friends and family, with UCM folks. People need to hear the positive, to remember that there are things still going on. It might be a little slower, a little bit different, but there's good happening everywhere. So when we struggle to find compassion in the midst of this pandemic, let us begin with compassion for ourselves. Take the time you need to restore your empathy. Celebrate all the good that is already happening. And remember that despite the struggles, we are living our second principle and working for justice, for a world of clear skies and active peace, with laughter and contentment for all beings everywhere. So say we all.